All right, so let's dive into data security, something I know you've been looking into. We've talked about Snowflake before, right? And how it's great for data warehousing. But we need to think, bigger picture. What about keeping data safe everywhere, not just in Snowflake? That's where Mage Data's dynamic data masking comes in. DDM for short.
Yeah, DDM, it's like, think of it like a really smart filter for your sensitive data. It works in real time and it doesn't actually change the original data. So imagine you've got a financial analyst, right? They need to work with customer data, see the trends, do their job, but you don't want them to see things like full credit card numbers. DDM can mask those sensitive details automatically. The data is protected, but it's still usable.
Okay, so it's like finding that balance between like security and still being able to use the data, right?
Accurate.
Now, I know Snowflake, they offer their own DDM, but I've heard it's got some limitations.
Yeah, you're right. Snowflake's DDM, it's a decent starting point, but it means you have to write SQL code for every single masking policy. Can you imagine doing that for every sensitive field across all your tables, especially when your data is constantly changing?
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work and a lot of room for error.
Exactly, especially for bigger companies.
So where does Mage Data come in?
Well, what Mage Data does is it takes Snowflake's DDM and makes it way more flexible and easier to use. Their no-code approach, it's a real game changer.
No code, meaning I don't have to be a SQL expert, right?
Exactly. You don't have to write all that complex SQL. Instead, you set up your masking rules through a visual interface. It's intuitive, super user-friendly, and it takes a lot of pressure off your IT team.
Okay, that sounds way better. But what about data that isn't in Snowflake? What about all those different systems companies use, like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, even their own servers?
That's where Mage Data really shines. It's built to work across all those data stores, no matter where they are. You set the masking policies once, and Mage Data makes sure they're applied consistently everywhere.
So it's like it speaks the language of all these different environments.
Exactly. And that consistent cross-platform protection, that's crucial for compliance. Think about regulations like HIPAA and GDPR. They've got really strict rules about protecting sensitive data. Mage Data helps you meet those standards across your entire data ecosystem.
Got it. So can we walk through a real-world example of how this might work?
Sure. Imagine you have a team of data analysts, right? They're working with customer data in Snowflake. They need some of that data, like demographics and purchase history, to do their analysis.
Right.
But you don't want them seeing things like social security numbers or full credit card details.
Classic data security problem. How does Mage Data solve that?
With Mage Data, you could set a policy to mask those social security numbers. Maybe it only shows the last four digits. For credit cards, you could mask everything but the last four, or even replace the whole number with a random token. Analysts still get the data they need, but the sensitive details are protected.
Oh, okay, so that's how they keep the data usable but still safe. And since Mage Data works across systems, that protection sticks with the data, even if it's moved somewhere else.
Precisely. This consistent approach, it makes compliance way easier and it really cuts down on human error. It also lowers the workload by automating a lot of that masking process.
So it's not just checking a box for compliance. It's really about making a more secure and efficient data environment overall.
Exactly. And that brings us to some really interesting possibilities for how companies can use DDM.
Like what? What else can Mage Data do?
Well, besides that basic redaction, they've got these advanced techniques. Things like format preserving encryption. That means you can encrypt sensitive data, but keep it in its original format. So like a 9-digit social security number. It stays a 9-digit string, even encrypted.
Why is that important?
It's crucial for keeping the data consistent and making sure that the applications using that data, they can still work properly. Like if you need to do analysis on data with dates that are masked, but you need them to still be in a date format preserving encryption lets you do that.
So you're adding security without messing up how the systems actually use the data. That's pretty cool. Are there any other advanced techniques?
Yeah, another really powerful one is tokenization. That replaces sensitive data, like credit card numbers, with these random non-sensitive tokens. So even if someone got unauthorized access, they'd only see the token, not the actual sensitive data.
That's a great idea. Like swapping out the crown jewels with replicas. Nobody knows where the real ones are.
Exactly. And because the real data is never exposed, it makes a potential breach way less risky.
This is really interesting stuff. It seems like Mage Data's DDM can do a lot, from helping with compliance to letting companies analyze data securely.
It definitely does. And what I find really interesting is how it's changing the whole conversation about data security.
What do you mean?
Well, traditionally, data security has been seen as this burden, this necessary evil that slows things down. But with what Mage Data is doing, security actually becomes an enabler. It lets companies share data more freely, work together better, and innovate faster, all while knowing that sensitive information is protected.
So it's not just about locking data away, it's about using it safely and responsibly. That's a big shift in thinking.
It really is, and I think that's what makes Mage Data's DDM so exciting. It's not just a security solution, it's a way to help companies change for the better.
So before we move on, let's quickly recap the main points for everyone listening. What are the three most important things you want people to remember about Mage Data's DDM?
Okay, three things. First, it's incredibly easy to use. The no-code interface, anyone can set up and manage those masking policies, even if they're not a tech expert. Second, it works everywhere. Snowflake, AWS, Azure, you name it. Mage Data makes sure masking is consistent across all of them. And third, it offers all these advanced masking techniques. It goes way beyond basic redaction to give you a really comprehensive data security toolkit.
Those are some great takeaways. It really shows how Mage Data is making this level of data security accessible to more companies, not just the big ones. But, there's always more to learn. What are some of the more, subtle details about Mage Data's approach that you find really interesting?
One thing that I find fascinating is how they've made deploying and maintaining DDM so much simpler. Traditionally, implementing DDM, it was a pretty complex and time-consuming process. You're talking about manually setting policies, writing custom scripts, all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but Mage Data, they've streamlined that whole process. You can deploy their solution in a few days, not weeks or months. And they've really minimized how much manual work you have to do. They've focused a lot on automation, which saves time, but it also makes it less likely that someone will make a mistake.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's also about how they've made it easier to use and accessible for more people.
Right. That's a great way to put it. And this easy deployment and maintenance, it has some important implications. For one, it means companies can start seeing a return on their investment a lot faster.
Because they're not spending forever just trying to get the system set up.
Exactly. And it also means they're more likely to actually use the system and keep it up to date, which is really important for staying secure.
It's one thing to have a fancy security system. It's another to actually use it the right way.
That's so true, and I think Mage Data has done a great job of making a solution that's both powerful and practical.
I agree. They've found that balance between strong security and ease of use, which is something a lot of security companies struggle with.
And speaking of ease of use, there's something else I wanted to mention. We talked about it a bit earlier. Mage Data's use of pre-built templates for masking policies.
Oh yeah, tell me more about those.
So instead of having to create a new masking policy from scratch every single time, Mage Data gives you these templates that are already set up to meet different regulations and industry standards.
So if I need to comply with HIPAA, for example, I could just grab the HIPAA template and use it.
That's right. And these templates can save so much time and effort, especially for companies that have to comply with multiple regulations.
It's like having a team of compliance experts built right into the software. I'm impressed by how much effort they've put into making this so user-friendly.
And they've even gone a step further by incorporating automated discovery and masking.
That sounds interesting. What does that mean exactly?
So instead of you having to manually find and tag all your sensitive data before applying masking rules, Mage Data can automatically scan your data, find that sensitive information, and apply the right masking policies.
This is like a security robot that's constantly checking your data and making sure everything is protected.
Exactly. And that level of automation is a huge advantage. It saves time and effort, but it also reduces the chances of human error.
Because even the best security professionals can make mistakes, especially when dealing with a lot of data.
Absolutely. That's why automation is so crucial for data security. It helps make sure those policies are applied consistently and nothing gets missed.
This is all really fascinating. I feel like we could talk about Mage Data's DDM solution all day, but I know we have other things to cover. So before we move on, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to think about.
Sounds good. What do you have in mind?
Here it is. How do you think Mage Data's focus on automation and ease of use will change how companies approach data security in the future?
That's a great question, and I think it's one that every company should be asking themselves right now. Because the truth is, the traditional approach to data security, which is often very manual and reactive, it's just not going to work in today's world where things move so fast and we rely so much on data.
It's like trying to put out a fire with a bucket of water when you're facing a massive inferno.
Exactly. And that's why solutions like Mage Data are so important. They're paving the way for a more proactive and automated approach to data security, one that can keep up with the constantly changing threats.
And that's a future I'm definitely excited to see. How does Mage Data's DDM actually impact a company's bottom line?
Well, like we just discussed, automation means lower labor costs. You don't need as many people to manage your data security.
So you're making your security team more efficient without sacrificing security.
Right. And by automating compliance, you're also reducing the risk of getting hit with expensive fines and penalties. Those can be huge, especially with regulations like GDPR.
No company wants to deal with that.
Definitely not. And maybe most importantly, Mage Data's DDM makes it much harder for hackers to steal data.
Which is probably the most costly security problem a company can face.
You're absolutely right. Data breaches can cost companies a fortune. They can damage your reputation and make customers lose trust.
It's the kind of thing that keeps CEOs awake at night.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
No security system is perfect, but Mage Data's DDM makes it much harder for hackers to get to sensitive data.
So it's like adding extra layers of protection around your data, making it much more difficult for attackers to break through.
Exactly. And that extra protection could save you millions of dollars in the long run.
It's a smart investment, not just for security, but for keeping your business running smoothly.
I agree. And I think that's why we're seeing more and more companies using Mage Data's DDM across different industries.
Companies are realizing that data security isn't just an IT problem. It's a business problem.
It's about protecting your most important assets and making sure your company can succeed in the long term.
Well said. We've covered a lot in this deep dive into Mage Data's dynamic data masking. From its no-code simplicity to its ability to work across different platforms, it's clear that this solution offers a powerful way to secure sensitive data in today's complex world.
It's been a really interesting discussion, and I hope our listeners have learned a lot about the changing world of data security.
Me too.
And as we move forward, I think solutions like Mage Data's DDM will play a really important role in creating a more secure and trustworthy data-driven world.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and interesting. Until next time, stay curious and stay secure.